I thought I would make some tea and tell some stories this evening of December 1st, 2020. I've been alone for 30 years. The strange fate comes from a combination of forces that various people close to me have analyzed and come to different conclusions about, most of them putting the burden of reason for the isolation on me. Not all of them. My father used to say that some of the habits of mind I lived with were self defeating. By contrast, the girl who taught me sign language bonded with me as an everlasting friend. My father was susceptible to what in the University of Pittsburgh community it is well said to call a whisper campaign. Many of the people there were dual natives from Israel. Jeannie, by contrast, not so much in contact with Israelis, but Pittsburgh rabble, just shook her head and dismissed it, saying, "You're deaf." That's how deaf people were treated. I was told as a juvenile that I was selling myself short, that I didn't know my own worth. And other people thought that I was easily exploited, picked on because it was an easy mark. For whatever reason, I ended up living a lonely life. The person who predicted that would happen was a Sicilian violinist on the periphery of Carnegie Mellon University, who had said to me, "Nobody respects you," and was the leading campaign agent in denying that I had been kidnapped and tortured as a child, which is just ridiculous. And a predator who, very shark like in her deliberate targeting of an impacted neuroplasm, and then bullying from the club like crowd that she took society with in bars around the city. Something of a police agent working for Midori Goto and Yoko Ono. Since my father knew Eisenhower and was in World War II on the same ship as George Bush and published widely and was himself quite a person, I've never really particularly cared that um, a person would have wealth and popularity and celebrity or not when it came to interacting with them. So as a result of that, I get accused of name dropping from time to time because I've had contact with various celebrities. And I get a similar feeling sometimes. I analyze our society, and part of its problem is that we have a celebrity superstate. And this often has more power than the political system or our community trust. it's hard for me to keep track of people. I'm deaf. I don't hear names. I'm not a politician in that way. Someone who I know who I sort of like. He's good at something I don't like about Pittsburgh, and he's from Pittsburgh, which is keeping company secrets. He's good at it. I think he has taste. I understand his reasons. He's a pastor. His name is Ross. He sincerely worries about me. You know, Pittsburgh society that I grew up in college has had a series of tragedies that have brought tears to my eyes. And he's been the source of the only information I got. So when he talks about casualty, I was bowled over to get an autograph from Clint Eastwood. I mean, that's out of the ordinary for me. And he's just pushed this aside. Oh yeah, Clint. I know that that's true because for him to just casualize what seems to me to be a very great personage, um, because some in Carnegie Mellon University being the kind of place it is. You know, I went out with Magna Wen there, one of the Morgan family. Yes, used to cross paths with members of King Crimson there and so forth. And he knows many, many, many more than I do who've gone on to make good or who were incredibly talented and didn't make good. So for him, it doesn't seem possible for somebody to be anything other than a name on the roster. And so Clint Eastwood is a name on the roster, and I get a laugh out of that. I mean, I can imagine somebody saying that. But there's a difference in celebrity superstate for me between trying to get your bearings in the world, what's going on in your mind and your heart, and identifying with a popular person, wanting to know something about them, wanting them to know you, and socially climbing. Meaning, in other words, if I was honestly hitchhiking around to hear somebody I admired, like I did to Fripp, the guitarist from King Crimson. I don't know if people know who he is. I don't like to talk about them because I hate them, you know, and I used to really like them. I know a lot about them. And, you know, for them, it's just, you know, a form of masturbation to hear somebody like me talk about the place in their society. I talked to my father about it once, and he gave me a title for a dissertation, God, Guns, and Rock and Roll. He said, go for that. But if I was, you know, let's say in a dressing room situation, chatting with Peter Gabriel and Fripp, two people who I liked, Clint Eastwood, and Ringo Starr came in even before I found out what a nerd and horror he is. Um, I would have just faced out. I don't belong here. I'll see him later, you know. I mean, Panis McCartney never meant anything to me. John Lennon, you know, I sort of weirdly idolized him, but I didn't particularly like him. Yeah, I thought, you know, Yoko Ono must be part of the nebulous thinking that goes on behind the scenes with this Rat Pack. Soulless they turned out to be, but with Brian Eno and stuff. But the idea that I was important enough that somebody would bother to hotwire connect the way they did this illusion machine, saying, synchronizing Leslie's rejection of me for lack of masculinity to the perilous Pauline caper, Lennon being the last nail in the coffin of the 60s. In other words, he had something about him that was similar to JFK and Martin Luther King that made him the last nail and so forth. It's utter BS. And, the Warhol coming in and putting a script in my house and then taking the script, saying we're going to make you into a lifelong observation. And that's not suspicious, they say. King Crimson's first record was played for me by a psychiatrist from Attica State Prison. I mean, they were planning all along to impact the neuroplasm and, watch me through peepholes. And one of the kidnappers even said, the CIA has micro cameras everywhere. George Romero lived in our neighborhood. He was always making movies. But it wasn't my penchant to think that people were that despicable. Instead, I angled for self-cultivation in these matters, and I ended up writing to Martha Gellhorn, who responded. She opened up to me about some things. I'm going to get my tea. I'll be right back. But what makes all this important isn't the celebrity content. And although obviously the super important aspect is what I wrote to Martha Gellhorn about, my investigation, there's a human drama that goes on and would have gone on even if that investigation hadn't taken place. Which it was forced on me. I saw some things that were too suspicious. Somebody had to look into. Now, human drama comes from self-development. If you look at the glory hunger of rock stars, there's still something professionally circuitous going on in the bands I like, Genesis and King Crimson. And of course I was knocked out, deafened, so after I absorbed them I couldn't take in anything else. I didn't realize they were behind doing that. Again, that's a little outside the scope of how I saw the world. I didn't see it as selling myself short or underestimating my value to somebody. I just didn't see people as fundamentally depraved and not to pull what they pull and what they're continuing to pull. But they were jamming the frequencies to create their PlayStation for Pink Floyd and so forth when they tampered with our national identity structure and high command. Knocking off Kennedy since day one. It was a serial killing engineered by the people who were loyal to them. And not everybody thinks I'm right about that, but I certainly am. I encourage you to look at the evidence. So I personally don't think John Lennon really died. I think it was a hoodwink. Because that's the only explanation there is for why, for example, the people who wrote the script about it weren't arrested and they attacked an innocent person. But if you look at World War II and FDR and the legacy that was smeared after Kennedy was killed, which was his intellectual heritage, and the tragedy of the Vietnam War and the things that came afterwards and the hocus pocus behind our national mystique that it was engaged such a way that people elected Bush and Reagan and Trump led to a disaster to our good neighbor policy. leading to disasters to our understanding of manipulation by the banks and the big money corporations, leading to disaster of an understanding of what's going on in cultural affairs at the grassroots level, for lack of intellectual engagement with um, the aspirations of people who are on the margins, for example. We've seen in there, of course, where the NAACP has done remarkable work. It continues to do some remarkable work, although it's a bully pulpit for black people, black advantage. You don't really see a continuation of all of the national identity that you would like to through the pitches that they throw. You see some of them. Certainly, what has saved our country has been the formidable dignity of the black middle class. But going into the Biden administration, we have to hope that the educational system gets overhauled enough to engage sort of the lost years during which we wasted a great deal. And we impeached ourselves by mismanagement abroad. Now, I'm not going to partake in the idea of attacking the United States, as some of these groups have come to think is the right way to go about managing that. Because not only is it not friendly fire, but it comes from the group that actually caused the problem. Now they want to straighten out America by beating us over the head after ruining our reputation. So now, when it comes to making sport of somebody, Warhol was an expert. He was a friend of Donald Trump, you know, and I won't, yeah, will petition you with how venomous their child molestation syndicate was and stuff like that. I know they get into it when it comes to squeezing me for text. But that's a symptom of them. For me, I grew up among dignified Midwesterners. We kept things that were private to ourselves. The way they've confiscated mail, followed mail, had terrorists in the post office union who killed two Kennedys as a special delivery of a letter warning and asking for help. It's typical of the fantasies that were cultivated by the rock industry jamming our signals and then getting people like Spike Oldby to work up the idea that Hollywood was the answer and so forth. I mean, their Fight Club mentality is as loser as it is vicious. So, none of those things seem to be anything but endemic to creatures like Ringo Starr. I mean, the whole culture that surrounds him. It's gargoyle culture, like something that Lucas Studios would put together with all of these bizarre haters filling up every vibration in the atmosphere that he inhabits. I wasn't, I mean, I didn't realize they were that bad. I mean, I didn't really think that highly of all their drug craze and stuff, but the underwriting of that culture that comes from UW dialectical UWism is really perturbing because, I mean, the idea is that you're supposed to treat everybody who comes your way as a human being. I have no problem with that. But then they say, well, this one is from a particular category that has, whose category has done to this other category. So we should exclude them. I'll give you an example how that worked. JFK was a white. Adolf Hitler was a white. So to get even with Adolf Hitler, we should get rid of JFK. And to them, that makes perfect sense. I mean, they're very deranged individuals. I have nothing but contempt for them. But they're powerful around here. I mean, they bumped off some counties. It was like nothing. It was whoosh. You know, like for them, the mail service is just something to figure out who's getting laid by who and then to peep, you know. It used to be if somebody peeped through your blinds, you could call the cops. But these days, if somebody peeps through your computer, I mean, you might as well, you know, cry to your whoever shirt tail you cry on. You'll never get anywhere. So now the coward, the horrible man, Fripp invited me to Claymont, where Peter Elliott was, and all that Gurdjieff voodoo. I mean, they're always looking for the guru. You know, I'd spent some time there, and I could wiseacre, as they say, about all that stuff. And it drew me into the investigation that, you know, I talk about in most of my other videos. But really, that's not the only kind of person that ever impressed me. It's not just weirdos or super, you know, influential or even musicians who have touched me. People think I don't appreciate them on the street. That's a big lie. It's a storyline that gets put into play by the Catholic worker. Martin Sheen beamed down from Takai's web in Star Trek for Nancy Reagan to get the child molesters going like that. Oh, Crary's trying to socially climb, you know, and stuff. And they made up this Taliban routine. Oh, he's trying to make himself out to be better than he is, and he's like putting people down, starting rumors about us, and he doesn't appreciate what we've been through or what we've done. And it's sort of, you know, their own production company in which I was drafted into a starring role as villain that I didn't apply for, you know, and it's it's berserk. Because the truth is that the people who touched me the most are the people largely connected with me through the fact that I'm deaf. And some of the people who I remember talking at length with, there was a girl named Michelle, and she was a remarkable person. You know, she was independent, she was separate from me. We dated, but we were separate people. We weren't gonna, it was too dysfunctional to strike up a lasting relationship about. And of course, the guys and the fellas had all this stuff they were saying about me just passing through and using a girl. And the female identity came from me through my mother and sister who had boyfriends. And as often as not, my sister was breaking up with some guy who was getting furious. You know, smashing our windows, stealing my speakers, whatever. They were doing all kinds of stuff. Because she was a one night stand type, you know. And I assume some of these guys still like her too, you know. I mean, it's just what Pittsburgh has always been. But we've got behavioral modification from the military now, so we can't even stand 6 feet close to each other anymore. But I'm just trying to give you a heads up of what's real and what's not real when it comes to that stuff. Because one of the blowhards behind their stuff is Ringo Starr. You know, he just blows. You know, what his tawdry tale about Jimmy Curry could have sucked on that is such a crock of shit. And they didn't even arrest Gail Burstyn, right? And you're supposed to believe that he didn't do a Houdini. What a bunch of bullshit, you know? And they're going around poisoning me in the mouth as a stepping stone to COVID, from AIDS to poison in the mouth to COVID, right? And you're not supposed to notice that. It's a big bunch of bullshit that comes from Ringo Starr. He's a complete creep. And there's nothing you could say to redeem him. And I think probably one of the things that gave him so much steam when it came to me was that I had no interest in him. When Penis Gabriel was writing me once a week with all his stuff, I didn't look for puns that would show the hand of the mysterious blowhard Yoko Ono. I just wondered what's going on with Pete, you know. I didn't think, oh, Paul McCartney's talking to him, man. He's talking to him about me. I didn't give a shit. It didn't cross my mind at all. I thought a few people knew that he alluded to me on the song because a few people knew that Fripp had invited me to Claymont. You know, and some of the things that started to go wrong, and some of the things that seemed to be going right seemed to be a mitigation process of trying to find a place in a jeopardized world. You know, but it turns out that it was Reagan and Fripp working it out so that they didn't know what was going on when they were pulling the strings all along. How about that? Oh boy, ain't they a caution? I call them the hoodwinkers. Now, the way I see my cultural vocation as a 60-year-old man in this tragedy, hoping to get through it, who knows? You know, I don't want it. Is I have certain kinds of spiritual feelings about where I belong. I should never have been taken from Jeannie for 30 years as I have been. She was my best friend. She wanted us what became of me, and it hurts her. We're both entering seniority and very, very poor. But I also feel that my destiny should include Massachusetts because of what the Kennedys suffered and the way that I was hardwired into their legacy. You know, I don't want to push myself in their legacy, as Pittsburgh always says I do. But the hand of the hot wire is clearly not my own. I wasn't even. The Kennedys are a very good case in point. You know, I'm very interested in the legacy of Eleanor Roosevelt and JFK and what it meant for what sort of father I had and what I saw and believed about the world I was living in as a child in light of things that happened afterwards and where it has all turned into. And that's not heartwarming, that's just ordinary reading and studying. I get good grades in school, I'm in the honors department. But the hot wiring is people saying I'm hot wiring and, you know, trying to aggrandize myself. It's a faint action. It comes from the syllable levels of the people in the garage rock scene who tortured me as a child, or covered for the people who tortured me as a child. Really brutally tortured. God knows it was horrible, horrible thing that they did, you know, gassing me and beating me, slaughtering blows, and then following an arrangement to poison me in my mouth and stuff in Seattle. So Seattle owes them loyalty. Seattle is a piece of shit. How can anybody respect them after doing something like this? But, you know, behind all of it, they get a big bag of wind because Ringo Starr blowhards his way into the mania. And the social climb top, supposedly. You know, so it's only logical to them that Somebody who's trying to talk to Peter Gabriel must be trying to claw his way into fame and glory. So why not take off his pants and put a firecracker in his shoes and chase him out onto the stage naked like Oliver Stone figured he'd do to little Jimmy Queerbait. And that's their mindset. It comes from that Holy Land, the Behold the Promised Clack that made the film Caligula, which is what Penis Gabriel really is. All that whole weird and nuts stuff about Amnesty International is a crock. He's just a Caligula on high. That's all he is. But Martha wasn't that type of person. She was just attempting to testify. She couldn't believe what I told her, and as a result, her disbelief was used to put into place the people who I was testifying against. That's how it evolved. I mean, she wasn't childish about it. She addressed the issue. She was very brave in that way. But the other characters who were writing to me, like Walker Percy, were just penises about it. They knew all about it. They were on the side of the villains who were doing it. And so the celebrity superstate is an occupied zone. The spirit world is an occupied zone when you have these British celebrities jamming the frequencies and bedlam. And then getting catcalls going. And they got hot wires through all the grapevines, you know. You can't believe, you know, the misloyalty that goes on. So it's not a surprise I'm in isolation. Who's going to be loyal to somebody who was used that way? To them, it's just like, you know, get a life, you know, you blew it. You could have saved John Lennon. That's their story. It has nothing to do with me. They superimposed it. It was like a magic stamp that they blasted me in the back of the head. It was like being shot. Slaughtering blows. And who are these people working for? They're supplemental income for Crockery Gronoff. They were working for John Lennon. That's the whole Houdini aspect of it. Robert Rippin Reagan, we didn't know, is what they say. And you know, they sabotage my love life and say, well, why does a person who walks out on a prior girl in a city like Pittsburgh, where girls walk out on him, believe he has the right to get married? And to them, it's a perfectly logical question. Why does a deaf kid have the right to learn sign language and be allowed to go to school? Who do you think you are, queer bait? Is the way they think about it, Pittsburgh. You know, and they had a hissy fit because Shulman was stealing books from the museum, but he's hardly the only person who knew he was doing that. I mean, look what they did to me. Pittsburgh and Seattle are just vicious maniacs. Slaves socially with this mythic mania that on high, with Pink Floyd puppet strings now. And it's easy to see why they wanted the Kennedys out of the way. The Kennedys could have easily bought with that. They were intellectuals. We haven't been allowed to have intellectual leaders.